And am I going live? I think I am. Hey, it's the Nazarite from Jerusalem, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. I want to talk about, well, I've spoken before about Toldot, this week's Torah portion, Esau and Jacob, Yitzchak, Rivka, and the rivalry. I want to speak of a verse which Esau tells Jacob after he makes his stew, his pot of food, right? The red stuff, the lentils. And Esau said to Jacob, this is Genesis 24, verse 30 in the JPS Tanakh. And Esau said to Jacob, let me swallow, I pray thee, some of this red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, cunningly, he said, sell me first thy birthright. And here's the verse I want to speak of. And Esau said, verse 32, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall the birthright do to me? And Jacob said, swear to me first. And he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau, right, the bread and the food, and he ate, he drank, he got up, he left, and he sort of discarded and threw it over his shoulder, right, threw it behind him, leaving Jacob the rights of the firstborn in his wake, right, as he left the tent. Now, I'm not going to say anything horrible about Esau. There are many different interpretations and commentaries speaking of the wickedness of Esau and how his deeds, his conduct wasn't wanted and warranted, and how it was no good. And to wit, it says later on in the Gemara that as halacha that Esau hates Jacob and that whole thing. But I'm not going to talk about the rivalry as nations. I'm going to talk about this idea of eating and drinking. Yeah, I'm going to die, so what's the point of it all? I don't need any continuation. What is the birthright? The birthright, basically, well, you could look at it on several levels. You could look at it technically, what were the rights of the firstborn? You could look at it more long-term in the sense of what is it that is passed on? The different blessings, the different covenants, perhaps. And the parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, were of two minds, so to speak, with Rivka being more partial to Jacob and Isaac being more partial to Esau. And over here with the two brothers, sort of, he's coming from the field and he's a tent dweller. Give me this red stuff. I'm going to die. What do I care about the birthright? What good will it do me? I'm looking for right now. I'm looking for survival. I'm looking to avoid death. And I'm looking, let's say, more in a broader sense of the here and now, and perhaps not. There's a good be here now, right? And there's not a false one or a bad one, but not as good, let's put it that way. There's one which can get you to think about the future, and there's one which could get you to discard it. With the same line, right? Of, I'm gonna die, so what do I care? And this is differently in Isaiah 22:13, where he says, right? So it's from 11. He says, Isaiah tells the people of Israel, but ye look not unto him that has done this, neither had ye respect unto him that fashioned it long ago, right? Israel, speaking of Israel's relationship with the Most High. And in that day did the Lord, the God of hosts, call to weeping and to lamentation and to baldness and to girding with sackcloth. And behold, joy and gladness, slaying oxen and killing sheep, eating flesh and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. That's verse 13. Isaiah 22:13. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. It's like, so what's the point of it all? Let's eat and drink now and take no thought for the morrow. Now, there is, I recently heard Jordan Peterson, I heard it a couple of years ago and I heard it now again. Dr. Peterson was talking about, and someone else as well, because I looked a bit more into the verse, right? Was it the Sermon on the Mount, or at some point in the New Testament where Yeshua says something along the lines of take no thought for the morrow, which doesn't necessarily mean don't pay any mind. I think it's also there to say if you pay your dues today, you won't have to take thought for the morrow. Or rather, even if you would take thought for the morrow, it wouldn't be as somebody who took no heed and no responsibility and shouldered no burden. Saying, don't think about tomorrow, concentrate on the here and now properly, and tomorrow will work itself out. Now, sure, there's this chaotic element to nature, unpredictable, and so nothing is an absolute. But what happens here with Isaiah, where he says God called to mourning and weeping and lamentation, and the people are like, hooray, it's a party, it's all good, because let's eat and drink, because we're not going to be around tomorrow anyway. Esau says to Jacob, I'm going to die. What do I care about the birthright? The birthright, as far as the covenant is concerned, has to do with continuing those blessings and divine promises that were given to Abraham, to Isaac. And when Esau discards, as the JPS Tanakh says, despised, he despised his birthright. He was contemptuous of the birthright. Maybe he didn't have the long-term vision. Maybe he was thinking of himself, and fair enough. But if you're going to think of the morrow and do the right thing today, it means thinking, it means shouldering the responsibilities of the firstborn. Let's put it that way. And I mean, again, you could look at it technically, you could look at it only insofar as blessings when the father is about to die. Any way you look at it, there's a responsibility, a kind of commitment, if you will, that comes along with being the firstborn. This is probably true to some extent even nowadays. I'm not a firstborn, but psychologically speaking, there's something there. Maybe practically speaking, there's something there. Certainly with the parent-children dynamic, it's something that's always different, since the firstborn is the one who's constantly discovering life for the first time, as opposed to younger siblings, right? Different stages and phases of life with the parents and outside of the home. They are brought and manifested put forth and manifested first through the firstborn. And Esau discards it. He was like, okay, I don't need it. And like I said, fair enough. But the Torah is not about nihilism. The Torah is about shouldering that burden, that responsibility. And he says, what profit shall the birthright do to me? That's what Esau says. But Jacob, perhaps, sees the great opportunity in accepting the responsibility, the position of the firstborn. It's not just getting the blessings. It's not simply the rights that you have. It's also the oh, come on, what's the opposite? The duties, right? The things that you need to perform, the duties you need to perform, how you need to move in the world, and what is it that you need to do. This is kind of encapsulated a little bit in this idea of the firstborn, who gets twice the amount of material things, and who gets maybe some sort of spiritual blessing, or, right, both. And Esau sells it to him. It's a deal. He didn't just take it, it was a sale, right? He made a deal. Now you could make different arguments regarding Jacob, and he's not a good brother, and he's cunning, and he's all of that has its place. I'm not going to get into it right now because I need to finish pretty much. But this idea of eating and drinking and not caring, and what it says in Isaiah, right? In the times of Isaiah, when he foresaw the doom of Judah, and instead of girding themselves with sackcloth and fasting, praying, and bettering their ways, they're, hooting and hollering and drinking wine and eating meat and saying, no, let's do this because tomorrow we're all going to die. Now you can look at it that way. The question is, and where do you end up? Where do you end up? You could take the responsibility, right, and take thought for the morrow in the positive sense of the word, not in a kind of anxiety-provoking way, although that's part and parcel of thinking of the future and considering the future and being cognizant of the future. But still, you can take it with a kind of dignity or respect. And that's also what Isaiah tells them. He says they didn't respect me, right? What does he say in the beginning? Verse 11, neither had ye respect unto him that fashioned it long ago. He was talking there about the project which Chizkiah, the king of Judah, was undertaking there to build another wall and to reconstruct the water that was around Yerushalayim, something like that. And so he says, you're not looking, you're not paying attention, you're busy saying, oh, whatever is today, and tomorrow we don't care. There is a point to caring. There's also a limit to how much you can care. If you're always busy thinking of the future, worrying about the future, feeling anxious and all, all that apprehension, then you won't do a thing, not today nor tomorrow. But I think what Isaiah is saying and what Jacob is kind of expressing here in his desire to take on the rights of the firstborn, it's also to take on the duties and the responsibility. And it's better to do it because they both eat and drink. When Esau eats and drinks, it's just for the now, just for this, perhaps, dare I say, lower, right, physical soul, animal soul sort of thing. A necessity, to be sure, biological, right? Survival, all of that is very deeply ingrained and embedded in every species. But Jacob, when he says that, as a counter to that, when he says, give me food, I'm tired, he says, give me the responsibility. Give me that. So when you do it, I think properly, they both eat, they both drink. But one of them does it with a kind of reverence, understanding the long-term repercussions of strengthening one's body, thinking of the future. And one is doing it for the here and now, and I'm gonna die and I'm tired. It's more me. And there is a place for it. But I think the Torah in this Torah portion is trying to say that just as he was in the field and he was in the tents, they were very different. They spawned, let's say, different people, of course. This idea of the covenant, which later on is continued through Jacob and the 12 tribes, and we know how it played out. And even if it wasn't exactly like that, technically, like with the genealogy or whatever, or the progeny, it's conceptually speaking something. This interaction between the two brothers says something very deep about the way that they view the world. And we, the people of Israel, the people of Jacob, and those who would like to go in that path, we are called to take on the responsibility. We are called to take on the duties if we choose, because Jacob was not the firstborn. Though he was destined to take those blessings, he wasn't. Here, in expressing his desire to do it, did he solidify his position as the true righteous firstborn, right? The real firstborn conceptually, if not biologically, physically. All right, let's see if there's anything in the chat quickly. Okay, so hey, Float, how you doing? Shalom, shalom. Even though he sold his birthright, would Esau still be considered a Jew, since he was circumcised on the same day as Yaakov? So the Hebrew covenants, supposedly the Hebrew covenant did move, the Abrahamic covenant did move on to Esau, and I don't know if it continued past him or not, but Esau was himself also a great nation, right? The nation of Edom, and so he would be considered an Abrahamic, if you will. He has that covenant, but not a Jew, I think, since the covenant which Yitzchak received moved to Jacob and not to Esau. That's sort of how it played out. And yeah, circumcision means a lot. It really does. Hey, hello, little Andre. And he says, Float says, I heard someone say Esau was fed more in the womb, hence the hair and redness. Yaakov was anemic, weaker of the two. Esau was the hunter, Yaakov was the one indoors. Yes, that's correct, and both have their place. And the question is, as we can see in the Torah, how does it play out? I want to wish us all a wonderful weekend, a blessed Shabbos, a taste of the world to come, positive vibrations, health, wellness, happiness, and good food, prayer, meditation, Torah, just to enjoy and to partake of this day of rest in fullness and in good energies. Shabbat Shalom. I'll see you, God willing, on Monday. Peace.